You ever drive through a mountain tunnel at night and feel like you're not the only one breathing in there? The air gets heavy, the radio dies, and somewhere between the echo of your horn and that slow drip of water, something starts watching. These are true trucker encounters, from the Rockies to the Black Hills, where engines stall and voices whisper your name through the static. If you love real highway horror, hit that subscribe button now and keep your lights on, because once you enter these tunnels, you might not come out the same way. I've been running long enough to know the difference between a lie your brain tells you at 3 a.m. and a thing that wants you to live. I drive a 2016 Freightliner Cascadia, Detroit DD15 under the hood, 53-foot utility reefer behind me loaded, with boxed lettuce out of Harrisonburg, bound for a DC outside Greensboro, grossed at 77 and change, tandems pinned at the 38th hole so I could climb without throwing the trailer into a fishtail. It was late winter, the kind of night where the air smells like wet steel and old leaves, and your breath turns the cab into a small weather system. I keep the cab warm enough to keep my fingers loose on the wheel, but I crack the wing window so the smell of diesel and rain-soaked asphalt stays honest. I took the detour off I-81 after a rock slide near the state line. That's how I ended up on Route 42, rolling toward Miller Ridge, two narrow lanes carved into the ribs of Appalachia. The old tunnel drilled through shale back in the 50s, when steel was cheap and traffic was light. My GPS didn't like it. Qualcomm kept nudging me back to the interstate like a nagging conscience, but the clock on my ELD was pushing me, and the dispatch wanted the drop before sunup. I set the cruise to 52 where the road let me, Jake, brake on low for the downhill. Eyes soft so the dark could move without startling me. By the time I hit the Miller Ridge approach, it was year 037. A cold mist hugged the blacktop and beat it into a lace of water on the mirrors. The tunnel mouth opened like a coin slot in the mountain. No shoulders, no escape lanes, concrete vaults stained with decades of exhaust bloom. The sodium lights inside were tired. They hummed and showed you just enough to trust the next 20 feet. I throttled down, toggled the Jake to off, eased into fourth to keep the pull steady, and centered the nose on that weak orange horizon the way we all do, as if we could steer by a promise. CB was quiet. Most nights you'll catch a joke or a weather tip on 19, the loose braid of drivers threading the night together. That stretch? Just the breath of the squelch and the faint rosewood thunk of rain hitting the roof. The reefer hummed, steady as a sleeping animal. My tires sang that low wet chord that says the road's giving you grip for now, but it's thinking about changing its mind. About halfway through, could have been 200 yards, could have been 3. The radio cracked like it caught a throat. A whisper found the gap in the noise, not over it but inside it, as if the static had learned my name. Breaker 19, come on. Unit Echo 73. You got your ears on? That's my handle. Echo 73. The last 2 digits are my badge from the Marine Corps. I never told the road, not on the radio. It's old superstition. Tell the truth only to the mirrors and the logbook. I keyed up. Instinct more than thought. Go ahead for Echo 73. Nothing came back at first. The tunnel carried my voice ahead of me like a flashlight beam. Then the whisper returned, lighter than breath but close enough to fog the glass. My own call sign again, except it didn't sound like somebody calling me. It sounded like me, played through a bad speaker from another room. Echo 73, the voice said, matching my meter exactly. Don't stop. The hair on my forearms lifted under the flannel. I glanced at the mirrors out of habit, the way you do when you hear your name and expect a face. In the convex, a glow bloomed. Headlights. Low beams at first, then the quick glint of high beams dipped as if in apology. The shape behind me was a Cascadia. Same hood slope, same running light pattern sketched under the sodium smear. I tapped my brake pedal to show tail. The glow behind mimicked it, a quick double blink in perfect sync, like a mirror trick. "Appreciate the heads up, driver," I said, voice steady because I make a point of keeping it steady. "You looking to pass?" No reply. The lights kept their distance, matching my pace in a way that felt polite and wrong. I flicked my right blinker twice out of courtesy. The ghost of amber flickered back at me. 2 taps. Exact timing. Exact heartbeat. Cold crawled up my right wrist where my sleeve had slipped back from the cuff. The tunnel amplified the sound of our engines into a shared animal. For a moment, I couldn't tell which RPM belonged to who. Coming out of a tight tunnel into wet night is like stepping off a porch into a lake. The world widens too fast. The exit loomed, that ragged tongue of darkness after the sodium. I cleared the lip and the mountain let go of me. Roadside pines reappeared as a black wall breathing mist. There's a gravel pull-off about 50 yards past the mouth. A state truck turnout with a dented barrel and a no parking sign that every driver interprets as, "Park for 5 minutes." I swung in. Habit when you feel tailgated underground. Give them the right of way. Get the weight off your nerves, take a breath. I felt the air brakes exhale like a tired horse. My rig settled on its bags with a soft creak. I watched the tunnel mouth for the other truck to burst through, for the light to flower and cut across my grill and wash out the wet stones. Nothing came. The tunnel sat there like a held breath. No headlight halo, no mirror glow, no hiss of air when a heavy rolls to a stop. The mist drifted, unbothered. Over the radio came the same whisper, very close, as if it were sitting in my passenger seat and leaned in so only I could hear. "You shouldn't stop. I don't spook easy. You can't, not when your job is to pilot 80,000 pounds through other people's mistakes in weather that doesn't care. But there's a difference between fear and a warning." I threw it back into gear, rolled back onto the blacktop. The dash cam hummed its digital hum. The reefer kicked once, then settled. I kept my speed lower than smart and my eyes looser than fear. Rain ticked the hood and a clock I didn't recognize. I told myself radio bleed happens. Old wiring, tunnel reflections, a nearby base with a strong antenna. I told myself some kid in a basement with a linear amp was playing parrot. I told myself my mirrors are a liar and always have been. Then the road disagreed. The mile markers started counting backward. 214, then 2113, then, without the break for an entrance ramp, back to 214 again. The reflective paint on the numbers looked older than the signs around them, like they'd been pulled from a junk pile and bolted back without wiping the dirt from the back. The next green exit board flashed past on my left where there is no exit. Miller Ridge Main Yard, Outh V only. The old state shield on it was the version phased out in '79. The rain softened the edges of everything except my certainty that I should not, under any season or salary, stop. Red cones appeared ahead, throats glowing with LEDs. A man in an orange vest stepped out of the dark, holding a wand. He had that half-step shuffle flaggers learn so they don't get sucked into someone's slipstream. He held his hand flat at shoulder height, palm toward me. The vest reflected too much, like it was new plastic over old cloth. The hard hat sat wrong on his head, too small, 2 fingers above his ears. He pointed the wand at the tunnel behind me like a magician about to return a rabbit to the hat. "Accident ahead," his gesture said. "Back through. Use the tunnel." I reached for the microphone. My throat felt like I'd been breathing reefer exhaust. "Maintain yard, you got comms?" I got an individual signaling me back into the bore. Static. Then, layered under the hiss, me, my own cadence, my own bad habit of tapping the mic twice before I talk. "Don't stop. Don't stop. Don't stop." I eased up. The vest man pivoted his wand toward my windshield with a languid authority, like he expected and always got obedience. He didn't look at my grill. He looked slightly to the right, as if his eyes were set for a different lane that wasn't there. I saw the vest then, faded to a peach color where it wasn't wet, cut in the old pattern with the narrow reflective X instead of the wide bars most agencies use now. The rain clung to him but never darkened his sleeves. Training says don't. Put 80,000 pounds into reverse at night on a wet two-lane, unless there's blue light behind you and a badge in your window. The whispered part of me, the part that learned to count breaths under incoming, said, forward. I rolled inches. The wand man stepped closer, slow as gravity, and the smell hit. Wet limestone and the green mold scent of an unventilated stairwell. The smell of places where water collects and never sees sun. The road under my tires felt slicker than before. The wheel lighter as if I'd just aired down. Through the windshield, the tunnel mouth waited, black as a withheld answer. Behind me, in the mirror, twin lights woke like eyes opening underwater. They sat the exact distance they had in the bore. When I touched the brake, they blinked in sympathy. The red cones reflected in my driver's mirror and in theirs with a delay exactly equal to the time it took my heart to skip. Echo 7-3. The CB said in my voice, not the words so much as the wear on them, the grit of 2 million miles. If you stop, you won't start again. I made my choice. Low gear, no Jake, no hard throttle. Steady hands like I was carrying a glass of water across a shaking room. The wand man's face never resolved. He pivoted out of my lane by degrees, turning not his head but his whole body as if he were on a slow hinge. As I slid past him, the radio got loud with engine sound that wasn't mine. In the bore, the tunnel's tired lights flickered in a rhythm I couldn't put to any machine. Water dripped from the ceiling in a line that fell onto my hood with the same timing as the whisper. Halfway through, the right wall bloomed with scars. You know the kind. Mirror strikes. Lazy white arcs at exactly the height where a distracted driver forgets how much his trailer swings. But these had colors buried under the chalk. Ghosts of logos. A swoop of blue curve. A lowercase script. A green leaf. My company's old livery sits under the new one if you look at the trucks, right? There it was, trapped in the concrete like a fossil. The tail of the painted arrow from our 2012 rigs. I took another inch of lane left, mirror inches from the wall. My palms sweated on the wheel. The cab got small. The reefer behind me changed pitch, as if a hand pressed on it from outside. Without warning, the radio swallowed my engine and replaced it with my voice. Urgent, not quiet anymore. Brakes. Brakes. Easy. Easy. Don't stop. A white shape flowered in the mirror behind me. My own truck, nose cocked, trailer yawed across a lane that didn't exist, tires hemorrhaging a spray of water that hit nothing. Sparks kissed the right wall and died before they had a chance to be born. It played 3 seconds ahead of me and 3 seconds behind like a tape loop sliding out of sync. The steering wheel vibrated in a way that didn't match the road. The smell of hot brake pads, metallic, sharp, rose from nowhere. My foot went light. I rode the momentum, eyes on the dim, miserable rectangle of night at the far end. The whisper layered itself over the engine sound until it felt like the motor was speaking. Don't stop. Don't make them open you. I came out the far side like an arrow from a wound. The mountains spit me into drizzle and cold pine. The road was empty. No cones, no vest. No patrol lights. The mirrors held only rain. I didn't take the pull off that time. I let the truck run another 3 miles until my hands were something I trusted again. Somewhere between 0050 and 058, the radio went back to being a radio. A driver out near Pulaski warned of a deer herd on the median, and somebody else laughed about a thermos that wouldn't seal. The night became just a night again, and I became just a driver, which is one of the sweetest things you can feel when you've been something else for a minute. At the DC, I dropped the lettuce and parked under a buzzing light. The mercury pooled around bugs that died with their legs up. I pulled the dash cam card and scrubbed through the tunnel frame by frame on my phone. My headlights, the dripping, the wall scars. The audio was worse, most of it a wash of reverb and FM snow, but there was a moment where a voice cut under the noise, low and calm. Echo 73, don't stop. I know my voice. I have heard it call maydays and sing along to late night radio and ask a waitress for more coffee just to stay in the light a little longer. What I heard on that file was my voice after a long, hard lesson, a version aged by a thing I couldn't yet name. The timestamp on the whisper didn't match my clock. It was 4 minutes ahead. I ran Miller Ridge again a week later because that's how routes work. We get sent back to our ghosts until we can tell them from the weather. The state had a sign up this time: bridge tunnel inspection next 3 miles. A trooper sat at the pull-off writing in a notebook with the slow patience of someone who plans to be right. I asked him how many accidents they saw in the bore. He looked up, pen paused like a held breath. Used to be more, he said. Back when they let folks stop at the mouth. People do dumb things when they feel boxed in. You ever hear voices on the radio in there? I asked, trying to make it sound like small talk and failing. He grinned without humor. I hear a lot of things I can't put on a report. As I rolled back into the mountain, I kept my hands quiet and my eyes soft. The old paint scars on the wall looked duller in daylight, but they were there. The humidity stuck to my face like a second skin. The tunnel smelled like breath held too long. Halfway through, the radio did its crackle, small as a match being struck in another room. No voice followed. Just the sense of a mouth deciding whether to speak. I don't think the road was trying to scare me. I think something old in the mountain or across time used the only thing it had to talk: repetition. Mirrors and radio and the way water remembers where to fall. If you've ever backed into a dock by sound alone, you know the truth of it. Trust the tone, not the story. That night, months ago or minutes from now, depending on which clock you use, a driver named Echo 73 taught himself to keep rolling when everything soft and human in him wanted to stop and solve the strange. You can discount this. You can say wiring and fear and fatigue make a stew that tastes like superstition. You can say old tunnels are echo chambers for our worst ideas. You won't offend me. I don't need you to believe me. I just need you to hear me, the way I heard myself. If you ever find yourself halfway through Miller Ridge at 041 with rain ticking and the wall close enough to comb your hair in, and your radio offers you your own voice with a piece of advice, listen. Keep it in gear. Keep the wheel gentle. Let the mountain finish talking. Don't stop for cones that don't get wet. Don't stop for men whose hats don't fit their heads. Don't stop where the signs are older than the posts they hang on. Because some warnings don't come from ahead or behind. They come from the part of you that already crashed, already learned, already found a way to talk back through the stone. And all it asks in return is that you keep moving. I've been pulling long mountain runs for 15 winters, and the San Juans are the teeth I respect the most. My rig that night was a 2019 Kenworth T680. Packard MX-13 purring at 62 psi, pulling a 48-foot flat loaded with kiln-dried pine out of Montrose, tarped and strapped tight. Gross at 74,000 even. Chains in the side box, coffee in the cup well gone to mud, ELD ticking like a metronome I couldn't ignore. Dispatch wanted the drop in Durango before dawn, but the radar on my phone was turning into a bruise, blue into purple, then that white nobody likes. By 23:10, the wind funneled through San Juan Pass like a bad memory. Snow came crosswise, dry sugar that stuck to the mirrors and erased the world in a slow, patient way. Traction law signage flashed ahead. Chain up area. Commercial vehicles must chain when flashing. Lights were flashing. I eased into the turnout with air brakes sighing, cab heat fighting back the draft sneaking in at my ankles. The smell was a blend I've known since I was 19. Hot diesel, wet rubber, metal cold enough to bite your teeth. I set the brakes, counted to 10, then shouldered into the storm with a pair of triple railers over my arm. The snow stung like ground glass on my cheeks. Headlights from passing cars blurred into milky halos. Their tail lights were red bruises floating away. I hooked the first chain to the inside dual, rolled the truck an inch, fed the links, locked the cams tight. Finger joints went numb quick. Breath smoked up into my beanie and came back damp. Wind howled through the valley like a train that never arrived. Back in the cab, I worked feeling into my fingers on the defrost, flexing, listening. CB-19 had been busy below Ridgeway. Plows reporting drifts, a cattle hauler cursing at a spinout. But up here it had gone sparse, then quiet. The kind of quiet that isn't peace. I nudged the shifter, eased off the clutch, let the chains talk to the snow with that low, gritty rattle that says you're married to the road whether you like it or not. At 18 miles an hour, the world is a tunnel. At 8, it's a keyhole. That night, the keyhole shrank. The San Juan Tunnel sits like a concrete throat under a cut. A storm shelter with a low ceiling and a service bay carved into the right wall, where maintenance crews stash plows and brine tanks. I rolled into it about 0:03, wipers beating time, lights dimming off snow caked on the lenses. The change was instant. Wind strangled to a moan, snow replaced by melt drip. Sodium lights buzzed overhead, making the air look amber and old. For a second, I breathed easy. Then I saw the tail lights, a line of them in the tunnel's throat. 7 rigs nose to tail idling. The red dots were steady, not brake flashes, a patient glow that pulsed with exhaust. I came off the throttle and coasted in behind the last one, a box unit with a faded logo I couldn't read through the snow grime. My foot went to the brake, light as a hand on a sleeping dog. I waited for a door to open, a glove to wave. A CB call, "No, come ahead, driver, plenty of room." Nothing. The tunnel hummed with engines and drips. The sound damped in the concrete so it felt like the noise was inside my chest instead of around me. I keyed the mic. "Breaker 19, San Juan Tunnel, anybody staged up ahead? You need a push or a pull." Static crawled and settled. The only answer was the steady bass of idles and the tinny tick-tick of meltwater hitting my hood. I set the brakes again, hazard lights strobing into the concrete. "Hop down." Cold slapped my knees up under my jeans. My breath fogged and hung. Up close, the first trailer was a reefer with the unit running. Humming along, steady 34 degrees by the panel readout. The door on the tractor was open. Not cracked. Open like someone had swung out. Set a boot to the step, then forgot to close it. Dome light on, snow melt dripping off the cab's rubber mat. No footprints on the wet concrete. No shadow of a driver leaning back to say, "Hang on, I'll be right with you." "Driver?" I raised my voice over the engine. Nothing. In the open cab, a thermos rolled in the well with each idle shiver. Thunk, thunk. The seats were empty. No bag, no hat. Just a CB mic on its coil, swinging as if someone had let it go at the count of 2. I walked the line. Second truck, day cab, cattle pot. The smell of hot iron and manure sweating out of the trailer vents. Open door, dome light empty. Third, old Volvo with a cracked dash and a rosary swinging from the visor. Blue beads dripping melt. Open, empty. Every cab the same. Engine on, heaters blowing, radios alive and dumb. Driver's side yawning like a mouth too tired to close. 7 rigs running, nobody home. There's a kind of fear a man can kneel on and keep working, and then there's the other kind. My heart didn't jump. It went quiet like an animal that knows it's too late to run. I pushed the thought down. Logic first. Maybe a maintenance guy told them to shelter and check the service bay. Maybe a wreck just past the exit had everyone on foot. I glanced toward the bay. A chain-link gate sat half-closed on its track. The padlock hung open. Beyond, the room was dark, smelling of brine and old oil, slick shine on the concrete floor where light hit. No voices, no boots. My breath sounded loud again. I backed away, turned toward my Kenworth with a plan forming. Get in, lock the doors, call state patrol, wait for a plow or a badge. As I stepped, the tunnel lights flickered just once, a tired blink. In that blink, all 7 tail lights went out and back on in the same breath, like a shiver passing through a spine. The engines never hiccuped. It felt like the power had dipped, not the trucks. The drip kept dripping. Somewhere water ran like a slow applause. I reached my driver's door and froze. Frost had bloomed across my windshield in the minute I'd been gone. Not the random fern pattern you wake up to at sunrise, but smeared. 4 horizontal streaks, each about the width of a finger, arcing from the bottom corner up toward the center, stopping, starting again, parallel as raked sand. On the passenger side, the same. At the back window of the sleeper, 2 handprints, clear as stamps. Palms flat, fingers spread wide, pressed from the inside. My cab was warm to 45, defrost on high. I'd been in those seats seconds ago. There hadn't been frost to smear. I opened the door slow, toes braced on the step in case something moved inside. Warm air met my face, stale coffee and diesel, and the sweater I keep thrown on the bunk. Nobody sat in my seat. Floor mat dry? Keys where I left them. But the inside of the glass traced the story anyway. Someone had laid their fingers along the bottom edge of the windshield and dragged upward until the frost lost under the defroster's breath. Someone taller than me had leaned into the sleeper window and pressed both hands flat like a kid watching weather. The breath that fogged the glass in crescents didn't match mine. The CB mic clicked once on its own. Not radio noise, switch noise, the tiny mechanical click of a button tested by a nervous thumb. San Juan Tunnel, I said before I could think not to. If that's maintenance, make a noise. If that's, I didn't finish. The speaker filled with whisper. Not words at first, just the texture of a whisper, dry as fleece on teeth. Then a voice like wind up a pipe, close enough to feel in the fillings. Don't get out again. I slammed the door. The locks thunk down like the cab had done it for me. Instinct pressed the brake pedal and dropped me into gear. The empty rigs idled ahead, red eyes steady. I tapped the air horn, one short bark that the tunnel chewed into a clipped cough. No heads turned. No movement. If there had been folks in those cabs, they'd have jumped. I crept forward, left wheels hugging the double yellow, peering under the trailers as if feet would appear. The tunnel exit was a flat gray coin, snow beyond turning the night into a white void. My chains clinked a rhythm like teeth chattering. As I drew even with the first truck, the rosary in the Volvo's visor swung on a rhythm that wasn't mine. Left, right, then stopped dead like a hand pinched the beads. My foot lifted without permission. The rig slowed. My breath fogged the glass and didn't clear. From the sleeper behind me came a soft, deliberate sound, fabric brushing fabric, as if someone shifted their weight on the bunk and didn't want to be rude about it. Don't get out again, the CB repeated. Flat now, like a recording. Or like it was tired of saying it. I kept rolling. Slow. One truck length, then another. In my side mirror, the line of red taillights seemed longer than it had when I walked it, as if every second made another rig appear behind the last. I didn't look back again. I didn't give whatever had hands in my warm air a face by imagining one. Instinct is an animal. Mine wanted the white void outside more than it wanted answers. When my bumper crossed the threshold of the tunnel, the wind found me again like a living thing that had been waiting. Snow clawed at the grill. The road disappeared to idea. I aimed for where the right shoulder should be, found the rumble strip by feel through the wheel, vibration like a zipper under my palms, and corrected left until it faded. 30 feet out, the tunnel's red tail lights smudged into the storm and vanished all at once, not one by one. My cab felt bigger with the thing in it gone, as if the warmth had exhaled. I ran to the next chain-up area with my hands quiet and my jaw tight. Called State Patrol when my voice wouldn't crack. The dispatcher listened, said they'd send a unit to sweep the tunnel. Said to park it up until the plows did another pass. I killed my lights and left the parking lamps on, the snow hissing on the hood like frying pans. I checked the windshield with my glove. The inside felt dry now, no prints. The sleeper window glowed faintly with the lot lamp, clean as if it had never known breath. I stared until the light trembled, then stared some more. Later, down in Durango, a trooper with a mustache like a paintbrush found me at the unload bay. Said they'd run the tunnel. Said there were tracks from several rigs, yes, and melt on the concrete. But no trucks inside. No doors open. No evidence of anyone on foot unless boots depress ice without leaving edges now. He asked, careful if I'd been drinking. I showed him my dash cam footage. It caught the taillights in a row. It caught a rosary swinging once, then hanging dead. The audio was mostly engine and melt, but at 0:11:34 there was a whisper that made the trooper wince and rub his ear. We replayed it 3 times. The word was the same each time. Again. People like explanations, I do too. I've come up with a few I can live with and none that I can sleep with. Maybe the tunnel traps more than sound when the pressure drops and the snow squeezes the air like a fist. Maybe the San Juans keep a ledger and make their payments in warnings. Maybe sometimes the road borrows your warmth long enough to press its hands on the glass and remind you that doors are for leaving, not for solving. I still run that pass. I still chain up under those blinking signs with the wind making a ghost of my breath. But if I ever see tail lights idle in that tunnel again, I won't get out. I'll put the Kenworth in gear, let the chains fuss and the wheel buzz, and move like a needle through cloth, steady, believing and forward. Because some nights the only thing between you and something that wants your hands to match the prints on the glass is a thin skin of warm air and the good sense to keep it. I run nights because the mountains talk less after midnight. Fewer tourists drifting over center lines. Fewer troopers with tired eyes. Fewer animals that decide your lights mean water. My name's Cole. 20 years moving paper, lumber, and whatever else pays the diesel out of the Allegheny side and down into the river towns. I was in my 2017 International LT that night. A26 humming smooth. Eaton 10-speed I could shift in my sleep. 53-foot dry van behind me loaded light with boxed napkins out of a plant near Fairview. 41,000 gross, which is to say the trailer didn't bark in the turns and the hills felt like they owed me a favor. ELD said I had 4 hours left to run. My thermos coffee tasted like the inside of a tool chest. Window cracked a thumb's width so the cab wouldn't get sweet and stale. It was after rain, not during. Pavement still wet, air still cold, everything the color of gunmetal and neon. 11:48 is when I rolled past the old Wolf Creek sign. The tunnel sits there like a punched-out mouth in the shale. A single bore with brushed concrete ribs that turn your headlights into a moving heartbeat. The dot replaced the lights a decade back, but it still smells like wet rope and brake dust and the lime dust from the rock they took in the 50s. You can feel the grade ease under you just enough that you feather the throttle whether you mean to or not. Local hands call the stretch on either side Echo Mile because of the way sound gets caught up in there. You lay on your air horn inside and count 1 Mississippi, 2, and somewhere around 10 the tunnel pays you back with your own joke, thin and bent out of shape, like it went swimming and came back with water in its nose. I set the cruise at 48. Mirrors clean, glass streaked by earlier spray, wipers at their laziest tick. Channel 19 had been quiet since the way station at Moundsville. One cattle pot bitching about a dead scale, then nothing. The heater hummed low. My left knee touched the door card. The plastic felt cold through denim. The cab smelled like diesel, damp cardboard from the load and the ghost of whatever sandwich I'd eaten at dusk. I did what I always do when a tunnel swallows the world. Eased my hands down the wheel to the 5 and 7 and settled my breathing to match the engine. Halfway in, the mischief I get when I'm alone too long climbed up. I thumbed the air horn, not a full blast, just a lazy bark that bounced off the ribs and went ahead like a scout. I smiled despite myself and started counting for the echo. 3, 4, 5, past the hood. The tunnel's sodium glow hummed and the wet streak along the right wall flashed like a metronome. 6, 7, 8. The echo didn't come. Silence in a machine isn't quiet. It's a pressure change. The radio's hiss drew down to nothing as if the speaker had clenched its teeth. The air in my nose felt suddenly old, like the standing damp at the back of a thrift store. I tapped the mic. The little relay click came through, but no static poured back over me. I checked the GPS on the dash. My cartoon truck froze halfway through the bore, blue arrow refusing to move even as the speed readout held steady. The darker dark beyond my beams didn't look like an exit or a curve. It looked like a thought that had stopped. 19 anybody hearing me inside Wolf Creek? I said, more to make a noise than for help. The sound of my voice felt like it hit cotton and slid down the wall. No answer, no interference, no human. Then a horn answered my horn. Not mine. Mine is bright. The kind of tone that peels paint on a pickup's tailgate when he drifts into your lane. This one came back lower, slower. A freight boat slumming it in a mountain. It didn't sound like it bounced off anything. It sounded like it came from behind the concrete. Like the mountain itself had lungs and it was testing them after a long nap. The wheel trembled under my palms. Not vibration from the tires. This was finer, like the old coin-op massage chair in a truck stop TV room. The kind that buzzes the bones in your forearm. The smell shifted. Diesel, yes, but there was a hot metal note under it that didn't belong to my engine. Something like a dropped wrench that had been left on a manifold. I checked my mirrors the way you check your pulse. Headlights behind me, nothing but the wet tunnel walls moving past like slow teeth. The horn came again, a dragged-out moan that found a frequency in the tunnel nobody asked it to. My cab roof seemed to breathe. The radio popped once, a dry crackle like a bad wire being pinched, then dead again. I feathered off the throttle and the truck slowed that hair's breadth that makes your whole body resist. The horn behind stretched, rose half a note, and something screamed. Tires being yanked across concrete. A squeal that doesn't belong to good friction. The sound came from behind me and to the right, and it was wrong in a way that turned the inside of my cheeks cold. It had no Doppler, no change, no movement. It was just present like a saw dragged across a frozen rail. Instinct got me. I put foot to fuel and kept it there. Not panic, pressed. Enough to feel the turbo spool whisper in the firewall. Enough to keep the RPMs where the engine sings, not where it thinks. The tunnel ribs marched through my headlights, steady. No brake to show light ahead. For 2-3 heartbeats I thought I might have counted wrong, and found an old fear men told each other on CB back when radios were new. Tunnels that don't end if you disrespect them. The exit opened the way a bruise lightens, a square of not black you can argue yourself into calling day. My hands left sweat on the wheel. I rode between the ribs and that square like a man walking a beam with a bag of nails on his shoulder. Behind me, the scream of tires on wet concrete rose to a whine that threaded my molars. The horn. It found an interval between my heartbeats and the engines, one long woo that made the dome light buzz even though it wasn't on. I saw daylight proper and didn't trust it. Things washrack bright turn out to be reflections in water. I kept the throttle pressed. The grade tilted, just enough to make the engine's note change by a hair you feel in your sternum. The concrete mouth fell away at my bumper and the shine of a wet morning slapped the hood. Paled sun diffused by cloud. Exit spray. A crow lifting off the guardrail, fat and slow. The tunnel spit me like a seed. I blinked, half expecting whatever had been behind me to burst through too. Some road rage cowboy I hadn't clocked who'd decided to teach me a lesson with his horn at 1 in the morning. The mirror showed nothing but the gray rectangle of the tunnel mouth. The drip line, the world beyond it, a gradient to black. My radio came back with a sigh, as if someone had lifted fingers off my speaker. One fleck of static rolled through and folded itself flat. I put distance down. 2 miles. 4. The grade fell away and the road widened, wet asphalt turning from pewter to ordinary black. My hand stopped sticking to the leather. I told myself, like we do, that it was acoustics, old concrete, salt crystals chewing wires, a weird crossfeed from a train down in the valley that made a boat noise out of a truck horn. I told myself to breathe and get a grip and make the next mile look like any other mile. At the state turnout with the broken soda machine, I pulled off. Parked with my trailer leaning slightly out toward the runoff ditch, set the brakes, felt the bag settle with a soft, relieved grunt. The cab went quiet enough to hear the tick of hot metal cooling under the hood. I thumbed the rear camera feed on the dash, a cheap system, but good enough to see cars when you're threading Walmart docks in the dark. The live feed was gray and grain. Nothing behind me but the empty turnout and the trace of my tracks like two ropes laid down. I pulled the SD and slid it into my phone. The app is ugly but honest. Timestamps in white block numbers. Sound married to image with a cough. I scrubbed back to 23:49:10 and watched my own tail doors tremble in tunnel light. The frame showed the ribbed concrete and the narrow river of melt along the right wall reflecting my lights like mercury. Sound was the usual. My engine low in the belly. Chain rattle muted where links clink against steel. The little harmonics of a truck alive and minding its business. At 23:49:23, the horn I'd tapped would have been due to come back. It didn't. The audio line went flat for a beat. Then a horn under it that the app's cheap waveform display couldn't decide was one tone or a chord. The picture stuttered. Just once, the way video does when a card hiccups. And then the lower horn sounded like it was in the trailer, fuller than the physics of a camera mic should allow. At 23:49:28, the rear camera caught motion, not headlights. Not at first. A dark shape in the far end of the tunnel at the round of my world, big enough to eat both lanes moving wrong. The resolution smeared the details, but the posture of it read, long, high, front-heavy the way only a tractor is. It surged forward 2 frames closer without the in-between frames, like the card dropped images rather than the object crossing space. In the smear of light, the shape had no cab roof, no visor, no intake hump. The whole face where a truck's eyes and brow should be was wrong. Black, another frame, closer. The black was absence, not paint. Rain beyond it did not reflect. Under that void swung something dark and ragged, low. Grill or guard or tangle of bumper steel, dragging and catching the melted runoff, so it threw wet in fan shapes like a dog shaking after a river. Sparks kissed concrete at the corners and died without birth. The left front wheel was not round, flat-spotted or something worse, and the rubber made a scream that the microphone flattened into a steady knife. Another frame, closer. The black was absence, not paint. Rain beyond it did not reflect. Under that void swung something dark and ragged, low. Grill or guard or tangle of bumper steel, dragging and catching the melted runoff so it threw wet in fan shapes like a dog shaking after a river. Sparks kissed concrete at the corners and died without birth. The left front wheel was not round, flat-spotted or something worse, and the rubber made a scream that the microphone flattened into a steady knife. I froze the frame with it big enough to fill the box. No cab, no windshield. The A-pillars rose and just ended, ripped backs of ribs showing like bone. The leading edge of the hood had been peeled forward and down, twisted into something that read like an open jaw. The grille hung in strips, chrome, gone black with smear, each strip vibrating with the horn's low note until it blurred. Where the engine should have been, where a radiator ought to wink with light, there was only wet, and behind that, nothing you could count as space, only a dark that made the tunnel darker. At 23:49:31, the moment my bumper cleared daylight, the thing did something the camera couldn't parse. One frame, it was 3 truck lengths behind me. The next frame, the tunnel mouth filled with fog. No shape, no lights. My rear doors glittered with a spray I hadn't felt when I was inside it. I played it 3 times. On the 4th run, I stopped being brave enough to watch the frames and listened. Under my engine, under the horn, under the metal scream, there was a second sound the app printed flat, but my ear knew. Tires trying to grab polished concrete and failing. The exact tone of rubber scuff on a garage floor when a loaded pallet jack jumps. And threading that, a voice the mic barely caught and maybe invented. A breath drawn through metal. Not words. The effort before words. I made myself do the next professional thing. I called highway maintenance on the number in the permit book. Told them I'd run Wolf Creek 10 minutes ago and thought there might be debris in the bore. Metal of some sort. The woman on the phone said they had a crew on the far side and would check. She asked my name and dot number like this was an ordinary report. Her voice made a small bump when I said echo didn't come back, like somebody's eyes lifted in a room far away. But she didn't say anything to show it. Back on the road, the world behaved again. CB-19 breathed, laughed, complained. A westbound called out a fresh deer strike near a county sign, blood dark in the wet. A plow threw salt and gospel from his dash. The heater finally pushed the damp out of the carpet around my pedals. The glass cleared slow. The smell of brake dust faded into metal and coffee again. I rolled the rest of the night with a steady foot and loose eyes, the way a man does after he's been reminded he's very, very small. In the morning, parked under a humming yard light at the DC, I watched the clip one more time. It didn't change. The horn under my horn stayed mashed flat by the phone's speaker. The dragging grill kept showering wet that winked like teeth. The last frame before daylight held something I hadn't seen earlier, a smear on my left door's lower panel. Not mud. A long, low arc like something had kissed steel and left black. I went out with a rag. The arc was there in the flesh. When I rubbed at it, my rag came back smelling like old water from a basement sump and hot iron. Under the smear, the paint was scuffed. Single grit fine, the way concrete sand will mark you when it gets a chance. People like reasons because reasons make maps. I don't have one that fits the roads we share. I have the tape, a smear on my door, and a night where the tunnel borrowed my noise and gave me back a story. Could it be an old Rex ghost? A physics trick with pressure and shape that stacked my sound on itself and made a picture of fear in pixels? Maybe. Could be the mountain itself asking to speak, using the voice it knows I respect. A horn and a scream of rubber and a shape my hindbrain runs from. Here's what I know and what I can tell you like a rule of road. If you take Wolf Creek after midnight and you get playful and you lay on your horn for Echo Mile, and nothing comes back when it should, that's not nothing. That's the mountain holding its breath. Keep your foot where the engine sings. Keep your hands patient. Don't downshift inside concrete unless you have to. And if you smell hot iron that isn't yours, don't check your mirrors twice. Once is enough to know. Twice is how you learn what follows. Because there are things out here that don't need a cab to chase you. And some echoes don't return. Some come for you. I run nights because the road is honest in the dark. My name's Ray. 18 years out of Missouri, paper and pipe mostly. With the odd farm machinery load just to remember I can still chain more than tires. That night I was eastbound on 70, cutting the tail of Ohio and aiming at the Pennsylvania line. Midnight had already slipped. Truck stop coffee had cooled into tar. And the river air had that late fall bite that sneaks under your cuffs. I was in my 2019 Kenworth T680, Parker MX-13 purring steady, Eaton 13-speed under my hand, pulling a 53-foot dry van half full of PVC fittings out of Kansas City. Gross around 62,000. Light enough that the grades wouldn't make me curse. Heavy enough to feel planted when the wind shoved. ELD said I had 3 hours left to run. The cab was warm and close. Heater on floor vents, dash defrost cracking a thin crescent of clarity out of the persistent mist. I keep the window cracked a finger because I like the smell of real road. Diesel, rain-soaked asphalt, stale coffee drying sweet, and the faint plastic tang of my load. The Wheeling Tunnel is the obvious mouth on that stretch. 2 bores brushed concrete ribs that turn your headlights into saw teeth. But a couple miles past the turnouts for an old mining camp. Company houses collapsed into their own basements. Conveyor trestles black against the sky. The map showed nothing special. Channel 19 had been quiet since the way station. One cattle pot griping that the scale was closed when he finally had his axle weights perfect. Then the kind of silence that makes you count the ticks in the wiper relay. The wind hummed just enough around the mirror brackets to remember its own song. I settled into that patient mindset that gets you through Eastern nights. Eyes soft so the dark can move without startling you. Hands easy on the wheel so you don't fight what isn't a fight. Mist thickened. Not fog so much as breath. Signage went from crisp reflection to a soft, haloed flicker. The rumble strip under my left steer pulsed like a heartbeat, then faded as I drifted back to center. My GPS lagged a second behind my reality. The little blue arrow of me floating off the lane, then snapping back with embarrassed enthusiasm. I crested a small rise that didn't feel like any I remembered from this run, and the road funneled. Shoulders pinched. Ribbon of light lowered. A tunnel mouth presented itself where there shouldn't have been a tunnel. No approach signage. No clearance placard. Just a black oval punched in shale, rim damp, air breathing cool and old across my hood. I eased down to 9th, thumbed the Jake off so I wouldn't bark inside concrete, and let the Kenworth slide into the dark at 45. The temperature changed the way it always does. Outside chill replaced by body warm air that tastes like wet rope and lime dust. But there was an extra note under it. A coal smell I haven't had in my nose since I was a kid messing around near an abandoned slope mine in Boone County. The radio hissed, then thought better of it and went silent. The reefer that isn't, a phantom hum every driver feels even when he's not pulling cold, laid a line through the seat rail into my spine. Halfway in, my headlights caught a figure in the spill of light ahead. Man in a hard hat, reflective stripes on a jacket that was more soot than yellow. Boots black like they invented the color. He was waving both arms waist high, not panicked, not casual. Frantic and precise. The beam took his face and didn't find skin, just coal dark like he'd been painted by smoke. The lamp clipped to his hat burned a tired orange. Cracked lens star-webbed. Light wobbling with him. There are rules you learn that no handbook writes. 1 is you don't play hero in a tunnel. 2 is you don't gamble with collapse. But you also don't drive past a man trying to flag you down when you're the only thing moving with enough mass to help. I hit hazards. Amber strobes turning concrete the color of sick honey. Set the brakes, felt the bag settle, and reached for the mic as I checked my mirror. Breaker 19, any crews working a bore east of Wheeling? I got a maintenance flag, possible incident. No answer. The radio swallowed my voice like a sponge and gave me nothing back. The man kept waving, both palms out, then pointing down, then chopping his hand across his throat in that universal cut-it gesture. I set my triangles on the passenger seat without thinking, grabbed my high-vis, stepped down into air that pressed damp against my face. The concrete floor felt slick through the rubber of my soles. Drips ticked in the ribs overhead out of sync with each other. An old tunnel's percussion section. "Sir," I called, and my voice came back wrong, thin and late like it had to take a long route to return. "You got a collapse?" He stopped waving. The lamp on his hat trembled, then steadied. He lifted one hand slowly and pointed at the wall to my right. I followed his finger. Faces watched me from the stone, not graffiti, not posters, not tricks of minerals and ragged patterns, faces soot black, eye hollows darker than absence. Cheekbones and brows dozens, then more. The way a crowd reveals itself when you finally admit it's a crowd. They weren't embedded like fossils. They were present, slick with moisture. The sheen of coal dust turned to paste by sweat. Mouths parted. No breath came from them. The noses looked crushed like the stone had pressed them flat and they didn't mind. The closest one had a headlamp strap half swallowed by shale. The lamp lens was cracked and still burned a weak coal fire that didn't throw light so much as suggest it. My scalp prickled so hard it felt like cold insects running up under my hat. I took a step back and my boot slid an inch, sole squeaking like a rat. The smell came up heavy. Coal, wet canvas, the ghost of blasting powder. That metallic blood scent you get from iron filings. The lamp on the man's hat popped. Tiny glass noise lost in the tunnel's soft drip, then steadied again. He smiled at me. It was wrong and small. A child's smile on a face cut with hard lines. He lifted his hand again and turned his palm inward, touching his chest, then pressed the same palm flat to the wall. It sank in up to the wrist like the stone had the give of mud. When he pulled it back, black pasted his glove to the cuff. I have run from men and I have helped men, and I couldn't tell which this was until my body told me, out. The triangle bag slipped off my shoulder and thumped my shin. I turned. My cab sat there like a promise with the door open, dome light pooling yellow on the step. As I moved, sound shuffled behind me. Rubber on concrete, a chorus of small shifts like many boots trying to find purchase, and the radio on my dash clicked without power, a ghost of a relay, then clicked again. Somewhere past my ears, someone breathed through a cloth and it made the hair on my neck tighten until the skin hurt. I didn't run. Running on slick concrete under 80,000 pounds is how you fall and die with a story attached. I placed my feet and put my hand on cold stainless grab and pulled. The cab's warmth kissed my face like a hand that knows it's in a hurry. I slammed the door. The locks thunked down like they meant it. The glass fogged from my breath and cleared under the defrost's steady push. My left hand shook once, then understood its job and found the shifter. I dumped the brakes and felt the rig rise on air. The invisible in the sleeper shifted the mattress with the weight of a cat. I didn't look, the miner moved. Not fast, not dramatic. He stepped in a patient, practiced climb. Left boot on my ICC bumper, right on the rub rail. One hand on the trailer latch handle as if he'd done it 1,000 times on a car body loader or a tipple catwalk. Coal paste smeared where his glove slid. The cracked lamp on his hat washed my doors in a thin amber halo. My foot went to fuel. The Kenworth leaned out of the brakes like a good dog eager to work. Tires hummed. The horn in my chest decided now was good for pounding. I rolled. The tunnel tried to hold the speed down with that small grade you don't acknowledge until it's useful. I kept it in 10th, no Jake, no unnecessary shift. Letting the engine sing that smooth note that makes a man feel like a metronome. In the mirror, the hard hat's light stayed, now on the roofline of my trailer, now toward the rear, the beam narrowing then widening as if he were walking the length and checking his own work. Faces in the wall tracked me. They didn't move. They didn't need to. They had angle enough. State maintenance, you copy? Eastbound bore. Unknown personnel in tunnel. The radio gave me the mechanical click again and then the faintest carrier hum, like a throat preparing to speak and deciding not to. From the sleeper behind me came the dusty smell of old canvas. My eyes burned for no reason I wanted to consider. Daylight arrived like a decision I wasn't allowed to make. The gray rectangle ahead whitened, then pushed down into the hood. My mirrors went from whetstone to open dark. Wind shoved the cab, cold shouldering through every gasket and making the plastic door card chill against my knee. I pushed past the mouth. The amber glow on my trailer skin was still there. 10 feet, 20, 30. It stayed as if attached by memory, not gravity. Then it wasn't, no drop, no scramble. One frame of world and the light was present. The next frame of world and it was gone. I drove 2 miles with my hands set where I'd left them and my jaw clenched hard enough to make my ears hiss. Then I pulled into a gravel apron beside a boarded-up feed store with a tin roof that ticked under light rain. I set the brakes, engine idled down, air dried out in size. I went back with a flashlight and the stubborn part of me that still believes in bolts and straps and things you can tighten, coal paste smeared under the latch handle, black and gritty, leaving finger grooves like someone had pressed, counted, remembered. The rub rail wore a new scuff arc about the height of a boot shin. On the trailer roofline dusted by mist, right where a man would have walked, shoe prints lay in a line you'd swear was tracked mud if you hadn't watched them manifest out of nothing. They weren't boot treads I recognized. They were smooth like leather worn glassy, edges blurred by 1,000 shifts on steel. I wiped one print with my sleeve. The grit came off on gray cotton and left a sweet, metallic smell that pulled me back to a place I'd visited at 12, standing at the lip of a sealed drift with my uncle, each of us quiet for reasons we didn't discuss. I looked at my reflection in the stainless on the trailer's corner. Black smudged my cheekbone where I must have touched my face without knowing. At the DC in Washington, a state trooper with a Monday morning mustache took my statement in a break room that smelled like reheated burritos. He said there were no scheduled crews in any eastbound tunnel. He said the only mining around there had been shuttered since the 90s, and I could see the head frames leaning into weeds if I wanted a picture. He didn't laugh when I didn't joke. He asked if I had camera. I pulled the SD. The dash cam showed what it could. My headlights cutting a wet umber cylinder, my hazard strobes painting concrete, the silhouette of a man in a hard hat, waving both arms just outside the brightest part of the beams. The rear cam caught the glow of a hat lamp walk the length of my roof without a body to carry it. Audio printed the tunnel's drip, the hum of my engine, and something else that the trooper made me replay until he stopped trying to pretend he didn't hear it. A faint rasping under everything. Like 100 men breathing through bandanas. He could file debris. He could file a suspicious person report nobody would answer. He couldn't file ghosts. He left me with a nod that had more respect in it than belief. I ran 70 again a week later because that's what we do. We go where the load pays and the logbook allows. It rained early and cleared late. The old mining camp looked smaller in daylight. Beams flimsy, roofs punched in, conveyor rust gnawing itself thin. Past it, where there should have been only rock and brush, the road pinched and gave me a tunnel mouth that hadn't existed on my outbound. In broad day, it looked like any other bore. Clearance placard, DOT lights buzzing, damp streak steady. I didn't stop. I didn't honk. I watched the ribbed concrete curve and held my breath without deciding to. Halfway through, my passenger glass fogged for a second like someone leaned close from outside and exhaled. When it cleared, 3 words traced where a warm palm had been. Keep 'em rolling. The cold paste fingerprints on my latch took longer to clean than they had any right to. You can tell yourself acoustics. You can tell yourself prank. You can tell yourself tunnels hold old breath and old noise, and some of it leaks when pressure changes. I'll tell you what my hands remember in the vibration of the wheel when the ribs start counting. Sometimes the road borrows men for longer than their shifts, and they find new work in the walls. Sometimes they flag you down because they think you'll listen, and sometimes they climb what you pull and ride a mile just to leave you a message you should have known your whole life. If you see a hard hat in your beams where no sign says crew ahead, if your radio goes quiet like it's decided against lying, if the stone looks back, don't stand there and try to name it. Put air to your bags. Keep the line. Let the mountain empty itself of its story while you do the one thing you're built to do. Because on some nights, the convoy you join isn't living, and the only way to honor it is to pass through without stopping. I run a lot of wheat and barley off the High Line when the elevators are hungry. Name's Martin. 15 years running hoppers out of the Golden Triangle, Chouteau, Pondera, Teton, down toward the mills along I-90 and the feedlots along the Yellowstone. That night I was west of Lewistown, easing toward the mountains with a 2016 Kenworth W900, Cummins ISX purring, 13-speed under my palm, dragging a 42-foot Timpty hopper loaded suite at 72,000 gross. I'd swept the tubes clean after loading. Tarp ratchets snug. ELD said I had 5 hours left in my drive. The cab was close and warm, floor vents pushing heat into my shins, windshield throwing back the glow of my dash like a dull lake. I keep the wing window cracked a finger to let the road in. Diesel, road salt. The dusty sweetness of grain that escapes no matter how you brush it. It was late October, the kind of Montana night that smells like cold iron and dry grass. The stars were out where the clouds quit, and the wind hummed around the stacks as steady as a wire. I came off US 87 and wove south through cuts of fir and granite, a long black ribbon between dark shoulders. The locals talk about Granite Hollow like it's a landmark and a rattle you shake at green drivers. Half a mile of wet breath, they say. Keep your hands easy and don't overthink it. I'd never run it at night. The approach sign sat modest on a post, Granite Hollow, clearance 14-2. No bright shoulder lights, no camera domes. Just a black oval punched into stone and the road narrowing as if it were exhaling. I dropped to 9th, thumbed the Jake to low, and rolled in at 42. The tunnel swallowed the wind whole. The radio's soft hiss turned to a held breath. Drip lines stitched the ceiling, catching my headlights like pins in a dark fabric. The air changed the way it always does in stone, wet, cool, tasting faintly of lime. But under it hung something else. A sweetish burn, like hair singed off a hog at branding time. The smell snagged the back of my throat and sat there. My CB had been a hum of weather talk east of Roundup. Inside Granite Hollow, Channel 19 went blind. No static, just nothing. My GPS froze the blue arrow of me right at the boar's lip and hung there, as if the road past that point wasn't being updated tonight. Fine. We drove before screens. I tightened my grip a half hair and let the wheel settle back into my fingers. Halfway in by the milepost in my head, the light felt wrong. Headlights cut a narrower cone, as if the walls were stepping closer and the reach of my beams dulled as if fog had thickened without being visible. The paint line on the right shoulder, clean and bright at the mouth, looked tired now. Chalky, worn, as though 1,000 boots had scuffed it. The sound in the cab shifted too. The steady hiss of my tires on asphalt dropped to a softer hush like damp dirt. The texture under the wheel agreed. Less hum, more velvet. Asphalt can do that when crews lay fresh oil or when sand drifts. But this felt like the road itself had put on a coat. I thumbed the mic anyway. Breaker 19 westbound in Granite Hollow. Anybody hear a driver? The relay clicked. The speaker gave back a flat, swallowed silence. I toggled squelch, no teeth. Just quiet. The odometer ticked a tenth. Another. If you've ever paced a friend's hallway at 3 in the morning, you know how long a small space can feel. I told myself the bore was maybe a third of a mile and my eyes were playing tricks. The numbers on the dash rolled up another half mile, then a mile even, and the tunnel showed no end. Just the next rib of slick stone in my beams and the slow drip stitching its own rhythm into my hood. The temperature in the cab slid, heat on my shins from the vents, a chill creeping across my shoulders like I'd left the window wider than I had. My fingers were warm on the wheel. The backs of my hands prickled cool. The smell deepened, sweet and burnt, like a barber's towel forgotten too long under a hot iron, like hair seared from a hide. It threaded through the comfortable layer of diesel and coffee and sat under my tongue. 3 miles on the odometer. 4. I edged down to 8th. Not for speed, my speed needle had bled itself to 30, but to give myself gears for whatever stupid thing I was going to find. The noise under the tires thickened into a low, papery shush. The line on the right shoulder looked softer than paint should ever look. I breathed out and leaned forward a hair. My headlights kissed the road, and the road kissed back in a color I didn't want asphalt to know. Not black, not gray. Off-white with a low, porous glow like a bed of old shells turned to powder by waves. I eased off throttle and coasted a breath to listen. The papery shush became a high, dry hiss. Every tiny pebble that skipped off my steer sounded faintly like china. Road's got lime on it, I told myself. Runoff from the ceiling, dust. Or fines from the rockfall. I didn't believe me. My left palm slid on the leather. My right forearm buzzed where the big Cummins fed the frame a not quite right rhythm. A shape flashed in the right beam, something thin hanging from a wall rib. For a second I thought it was a bare wire. It was a narrow curved length of off-white, a smooth arc with a rough honeycomb inside. It spun as my draft found it and knocked against the concrete with a sound not metal, not stone. Hollow. It dropped. Crunched under the tandem with a crack like thin ice, my mouth filled with warm metal taste. I didn't look again at the walls. My eyes knew how to lie if I asked them nicely. 6 miles. 8. The odometer no longer argued. Granite Hollow had become a mile that didn't end. The light at the edges of my beams faded more with every truck length like a battery under load. The dash backlight felt dimmer by a hair. The sound of the engine grew smaller than it should have been, the way a voice sounds in a large room. My hands did their job without me. Left a whisper left to hug center, right easing back to keep the trailer honest. Little feed in, little release. The dance you do when you know friction is a suggestion. I reached for the trailer light switch to blink the markers, to give myself something human. My knuckles brushed dust where dust hadn't been a mile back, gritty and fine, lying along the dash like flour. I rubbed it between finger and thumb. It rolled like ash. The smell that rose off it when the vent breathed across my hand was hair. Burnt hair, not a suggestion, evidence. I heard the first crunch through my feet before I heard it with my ears, a crackle like stepping on a crab shell. The steering wheel ticked to the feel of hard small things resisting and giving. The road had lost asphalt a while back. The soft surface wasn't clay or fines. It shifted under weight with a dry compliance that had nothing to do with water. Bones, my brain supplied quietly. Not whole ones. The small ones that are always there for the finding if you sift through prairie dust and scavenger trails long enough. Phalanges, tarsals, bird, rodent, and, in the peripheral honesty of my headlight edges, longer curves lodged in the wallstone like tusks, like ribs. Their insides looked like the inside of the one the draft had spun. Honeycomb where marrow should be. White turned tan where damp touched it, blackened streaks where smoke had kissed. I have braked into elk and eased through mud humps under floodwater and pulled iron back from the culvert where wind tries to teach you a bad lesson. I did not break here. The animal in my chest that learned to survive off Mariah's Pass took the wheel. I went to 7th to curl torque under me, rolled back into the throttle and kept the line. The engine note flattened. The tunnel air pressed hands onto my shoulders. The hiss under the tires rose in pitch like wind in wheatheads in August. The smell of burnt hair strengthened until my tongue tried to lift away from itself. 10 miles on the odometer. 12. The dim at my headlight cut became a presence, not an absence. The beam showed a patient dust hanging above the road surface as if the wheels were fanning an old room. When I drew breath, the dust made a path and snuck into me and lit the back of my throat with old heat. The dash clock walked forward like a good soldier. 0111, 0122, no exit. My fuel gauge had been fat when I entered, 3/4 rocking toward half on the bends. Somewhere past mile 16 inside a half-mile hole, the needle dipped harder than it had any right to, like the tank had started drinking for two. I watched it, felt the hot slide of anger at the math, then left it. Numbers wouldn't help me. Hands on the wheel would. There's a point in a slide when you pick a truth and drive it. I pushed the throttle down and held it, not frantic, not timid. The Cummins answered with a dry, even pull. The W900 leaned forward like a horse that knows the barn is somewhere ahead, whether it can smell it or not. The dust thickened so the tunnel felt smaller and larger at once. The white on the road surface blurred to a line. The hiss under the tires turned into a steady, delicate roar, tiny things breaking by the thousands to make room for rubber. Movement on the left wall flickered and tried to be a shape. Eye sockets too many and too small, jawlines that didn't align like living jaws do. Stone that remembered heat. I refused it my focus. I picked the center stripe, tired, chalky, still straight, and prayed to nothing I believe in that it was painted where the road was honest. The light ahead changed the way dawn does when you think dawn isn't coming. The black thinned to gray, the gray frayed to something that could be air that wasn't trapped. The tunnel mouth didn't appear. The tunnel skin peeled off the world. The hiss under the tires broke into coarse hum. Asphalt returned like the memory of a friend's voice. Cold air bit my cheeks as if someone opened a door from outside my cab and let Montana back in. I burst into a night that had moved on without me. The stars I'd last seen over the pines had slid west. The dash clock punched 02.19. The fuel needle sat a hair above E, the low fuel light beating its slow orange pulse. My hands stayed where they were for 2 miles. The dust on the dash glowed pale in the instrument light and left faint finger trails where I had touched without knowing. I set it down at a turnout. Gravel apron pocked with puddles reflecting a single yard lamp, pulled the card from my dash, cam, and just sat until the heater overcame the cold creep the tunnel had draped over my shoulders. The rear camera showed what rear cameras show. The black of a tail swinging in a controlled way. The interior mic caught what engines catch, my own hum, and under it, at the edge of hearing, a dry whispering, like paper rubbed against paper. No frames of rib or tusk, no proof. Only the timestamp walking smooth from 0102 at the mouth to 02.18 at the exit, with no jump and no explaining what had eaten 50 minutes without giving me an inch of fresh sky. When dawn found me laid over, under a Walmart sodium light, I wiped the dust off the dash with a damp shop towel. The towel turned gray. The smell rose warm and unmistakable. Singed hair with a top note of something bitter, almost sweet, like horn cut on a belt sander. I washed my hands twice with the tiny bottle of pink soap I keep under the passenger seat. The smell clung to my nails until lunch. A highway patrolman in Townsend listened because that's his job. He asked if I'd detoured. I pointed at the math, the odometer logging 20 miles in a half-mile hole, fuel burn like I'd climbed a long grade hauling stone. He nodded like men nod when they've got nothing they can write. He told me Granite Hollow is a short bore the railroad blasted for road back in the 30s, half a mile even, damp and cranky as a cellar. He said watch for ice on the drip line. He didn't say anything about smell. I didn't either. I still run the high line. Grain doesn't move itself. I still take Granite Hollow when the permits and the clock make it the smart line. I go in with heat on my shins and the window cracked a finger to keep me honest. If the headlights dull by a hair and my radio goes from shy to silent, I put my hands on the 5 and 7, pick the tired center stripe, and let the engine sing the one note it was born to sing. I do not slow for shapes the walls would like me to admire. I do not test the dirt with my boot. I will not taste that dust again, because there are tunnels that move air and rock, and there are tunnels that move time. Some roads digest what passes through and give it back as powder that smells like the last thing it remembers. If you ever feel your steering wheel go soft and hear paper whisper where asphalt should hum, don't look for proof. Lay your foot down, trust the paint, and keep it straight until Montana takes you back. When you come out, you'll be missing an hour and some fuel. You'll have a layer of something on your dash that a wash bay doesn't know how to name. And you'll know the way a driver knows without gospel, that Granite Hollow is shorter than it was for you and longer than it will admit. I run nights because silence behaves better after midnight. Name's Hale. 21 years on the road, most of them pulling paper and produce between Reno and Salt Lake, bouncing I-80 like a needle in a groove. This run I was westbound, light, on weight, 31,000 gross, hauling palletized lettuce in a 2018 Freightliner Cascadia, DD15 purring at 1/250. Eaton 12-speed that shifts like a thought. The cab was warm, dry heat pooling at my shins. I keep the wing window cracked a finger because diesel, rain-soaked asphalt, and stale coffee keep me awake more honestly than caffeine. Late autumn, thin rain, air crisp the way desert gets when the wind has scraped it clean. The mirrors held halos, sodium lights from distant exits smearing into the wet. ELD said I had 4 hours left to run. My thermos had gone metallic and wrong 2 hours back outside Winnemucca, but I kept sipping to feel the heat on my tongue. Lovelock Tunnel is the little mouth carved into the basalt like a bad idea someone made permanent. One lane, tight curve, no shoulder. Old miners punched it. The state polished it enough to get trucks through. You learn to treat it like a living thing. Announce yourself, listen for an answer, then move like you belong. Locals call it a courtesy tunnel. You don't gamble with anyone's bumper in there. Wind hummed around my mirrors like a wire note. Wipers ticked a lazy metronome. Channel 19 had been friendly at the rye patch grade. A cattle pot complaining about a cold draft through the passenger door. A flatbed bragging about a new tarp. Then it went thin and distant. CB static settling into the kind of hush that makes you check if your speaker died. The pavement darkened ahead, the wet turning blacker where the hill cut the wind. My headlights melted signage into white ghosts. The tunnel's approach came quick. A reflective triangle warning, 1 lane, sound horn before entering, a paint-scarred post and then the mouth itself, a dark curve the shape of a crooked grin. I eased down to 38, killed the Jake, tapped the air horn, a short steady bark that tunneled ahead of me like a scout. I expected the echo to come back bent and late like it always does. What I got instead were 2 bright white points halfway into the bore, dead center. Backup lights. I went slack on the throttle and let the truck settle. The points didn't move. I keyed up. Westbound at Lovelock. Got your backers in the bore? Go ahead, driver. I'll hold the line. Static answered, like felt pressed to a speaker. No voice. The 2 white dots hung there, clean and sharp, washed to a cold blue by my LEDs. Not brake lights, not a hazard triangle. Backup lights, flat and certain. I watched for the wash of a reverse beacon. Nothing. No jiggle of metal, no quiver of reflective tape. Just 2 white coins floating in the curve. I set the brakes and felt the bag settle. Hazards on. Amber pulses strobed my hood and turned the wet into crawling light. I tried again. Any unit inside Lovelock in reverse? This is westbound, sitting outside the mouth. What do you need? The speaker clicked its tiny relay click and gave me back the tunnel's quiet. My GPS arrow froze at the lip like it had put its hands in its pockets and decided to wait. The reefer that isn't thrummed like a memory through the seat rail. I watched the dots while the wipers made their slow passes. They didn't drift, they didn't wink, they just held. A minute is long when you're parked in the desert. 3 minutes is longer. At 5, common sense and schedule got together and voted. I eased off the brakes and rolled to the stop line again. My hands found 5 and 7 on the wheel. Breath slow. Headlights aimed for the white points like they were the only honest thing left in the world. Inside, the tunnel took the night and made it close. Damp air climbed my face, smelling like limestone and old rope with a top note I didn't trust. Hot dust, maybe. The taste of something electrical dreaming about burning. The concrete ribs flashed past, my beams raking their tired paint. Tires hissed on slick asphalt, a soft, steady sound that sat under my heartbeat. The white dots held at the bend where the curve hid the far wall. I expected an outline to reveal itself as my angle changed. Door, bumper, ladder, anything that weight belongs to. The points stayed freestanding, exactly the same distance from each other, exactly the same height. I clicked the mic because habit is armor. Eastbound in Lovelock, you got a gear, I see your backups. Silence, 20 yards, 15, 10. Headlights flared on concrete scuffs and old mirror strikes etched like chalk where someone forgot they were tall. The 2 white points bloomed in the center of my vision, not flaring with glare, not dimming at the edges, just present. My left hand itched to touch the brake. I let the engine hold me where it wanted, steady and low. At 5 yards, the points resolved and didn't resolve. Not bulbs, not housings, no glass rim, no plastic depth. Just twin discs of white set into darkness as if drilled there. They hung at windshield height in raw air. As my nose cut even with them, my headlights flickered. Not a relay blink, an animal flinch. The beam dropped for a heartbeat and came back harder, like my truck had shivered. The 2 white points pivoted. Not a mechanical pan, not a wiggle. A living turn, smooth and without tremor, following me. Light doesn't do that. Eyes do. The tunnel air cooled my cheeks in a way my heater couldn't argue with, a cold that felt intentioned. Every small hair under my sleeve stood up as if a breeze lifted it. The smell sharpened. Wet stone, brake dust, and a faint singe like burnt hair scrubbed into concrete. Instinct made me move like I'd trained for it. I kept the line, kept the throttle steady, kept my hands gentle. In the mirror, the points slid to keep pace just inside the curve, staying level with my cab window. The pupil part of them, the dark inside the white, dilated and loosened as my lights hit, then tightened to pins that somehow still saw. No halo, no lens flare, eyes. Westbound clearing the bore, I said into the mic, steady because my voice knows better than to show panic. The radio spilled a sound that wasn't static and wasn't voice. A soft, dry rubbing like cotton dragged on tile. Halfway through, the curve pinched closer, wall brushing the thought of my mirror. The eyes drifted in toward my glass and held to the right of my nose, not hungry, not angry, just fixed. Just. The tunnel felt like a throat, and my truck was something it had decided not to swallow yet. My headlights flickered again. The dash backlights dimmed a hair, then swelled. In the tiny rear convex mirror, my trailer doors coasted steady. No wobble, no push. The white points tapped the edge of the mirror frame and bounced back in like a moth that knows glass by memory. They didn't touch. But the air between my face and the glass found a chill I didn't bring in with me. The exit washed into view in a pale smear. The desert night beyond made softer by rain. The two white points widened, not moving closer so much as opening like a camera choosing more light. In that widening there were lines, faint glints around the whites, facets that weren't facets, as if film wet on water had caught a reflection too thin to believe. I felt seen, not noticed. Seen like a measure taken. I passed them. They pivoted to keep me. For the breath's length when they were level with my B-pillar, everything in the cab felt lighter, like the truck had slipped on black ice made of air. The heater coughed. The steering wheel lost a degree of weight and took it back. Then daylight, nightlight, whatever the world is outside concrete, kissed the hood, and the tunnel let us go. The two white points stopped at the shadow line, as if they respected rules I didn't know, hung there a heartbeat and went dim, not away. The radio hissed like someone exhaled, and Channel 19 muttered to itself again about an eastbound missing the 178 ramp. I took 3 miles before I trusted my hands enough to stop. The turnout I picked was a gravel fan with a trash barrel and a sign half shot to hell. I set the brakes. The truck sighed onto its bags. Wet desert air slipped through the crack of the window and met the cab warmth like 2 dogs sniffing. I thumbed the rear camera feed. Nothing in the bore behind but darkness. No white points on the glass. I pulled the SD card and ran the clip on my phone. Scrub wheel under my thumb, timestamp ticking honest seconds. The video showed headlight throw and ribbed concrete and the curve with its slick corners. Audio gave me engine at low song, tires hissing, a faint patter of drips. At 01:37:12, everything dimmed, 1 frame only, like the camera blinked. At 01:37:13, the brightness returned with a slight overcorrection, as if the sensor decided to see more than it could. No twin lights floating, no eyes. The dash cam can catch a deer's stare from 100 yards, but it printed nothing here. On the audio under my engine, there was a hiss that wasn't water. A whispery scrape like a fingertip test along the outside of my window. I went back with a flashlight against better judgment. The truck's skin was wet with blown rain, beads running in organized little worlds. On the passenger side glass, I caught a pattern that didn't match wiper arcs or my sleeve. 2 clean ovals side by side at temple height, each the size of a quarter, perfectly round in a universe of droplets. Dry spots, like something very close to the glass had blocked the mist when we exited. They were exactly the distance apart my eyes are when I lean into a mirror to check if I've slept. I measured with my thumb and forefinger because I couldn't not. They matched me. You can call it trick light. Two reflective bolts, something hung in the curve. You can say I made eyes out of metal because the brain hates randomness and loves faces. I don't argue. I've learned the road keeps its own logic and doesn't ask me along for the math. I do know my headlights flickered without a relay problem, my radio went quiet without a bad ground, and two dry circles marked my glass like breath never fogged them because something already owned that space. 2 days later, running the same stretch eastbound, I approached Lovelock in noon sun. No rain. Heat shimmered. The tunnel looked smaller in daylight, the concrete ribs stark, the curve forgiving. I tapped the horn for courtesy, out of superstition now, not habit. Halfway through, a tractor coming the other way eased up to the mouth and waited for me. I waved as I came out. The other driver didn't wave back. His hands were at 10 and 2, knuckles white. He stared into the bore over my trailer like he'd lost something and expected it to return with interest. The next night, parked under, humming sodium behind a DC, I walked a rag across the passenger window. The two dry ovals were gone. In their place near the edge of the glass where my head never leans, a faint crescent of clean had appeared. One more shape where droplets refused to stick, curved like a smile that never learned the trick of warmth. Here's what I keep like a note pinned under my visor for guys who ask about one-lane tunnels and courtesy horns. If you ever ease into Lovelock at night and see backup lights hanging midair, don't sit there and make a plan for someone who isn't there. Announce yourself. Keep it in gear. Let the engine sing one quiet note and carry you. If your headlights flinch and your radio decides to be a church, don't tap the brakes to think. You already did all your thinking when you chose this road. And when the white points turn to follow you, trust that eyes are watching, not bulbs failing. Because some places in the desert don't reflect your light back. They return their own. And not everything that looks like reverse is trying to get out of your way. I run nights because they're cleaner. Fewer brake checks on grades, fewer tourists riding their brakes through corners like they're milking a cow, fewer people inventing emergencies in your stopping distance. Name's Logan. 17 years on the road, most of it hauling grocery freight over the top half of the country. That night I was pushing east through Idaho, running the river bottoms and cuts that stitch I-84 to the 2 lanes you take when a closure pins the interstate. Dispatch had me on a backfill run, dry goods out of Nampa headed for a crossdock in Salmon by morning. My rig, 2019 Peterbilt 579, Cummins X15 turning smooth at 1D300, automated 12-speed that minds its manners if you do. 53-foot dry van behind me, mixed pallets, canned tomatoes, bleach, paper towels. 72,000 gross. ELD said I had 5 hours and a minute left. The cab smelled like diesel, and the ghost of coffee gone metallic, with that faint paper dust that seeps out of any load no matter how tightly it's wrapped. I keep the wing window cracked a finger to keep the warm air honest. It was late October. Thin rain stitched the windshield and left halos in the mirrors around the few lights that live out there. Ranch drives and the odd gas station that never really closes. The air coming through the vent was mountain cold, the kind that finds the seam in your sleeve and lives there. CB-19 had gone soft after Boise, a couple of drivers jawing about elk outside Fairfield. Then that late shift hush where static is a kind of companion. I was listening anyway. Sometimes silence lies. The squelch tells on it. Somewhere north of Bliss, I took a signed detour for night work and let the 2-lane lay itself under me. The road narrowed, cedars and rock faces shouldering closer. The river down there to my right just a sound, the constant hush of water going about its business. Idaho's got tunnels, but not the big, loud ones like back east. These are short, mean curves punched into basalt. The kind where you tap a courtesy horn and keep your hands loose so the wall doesn't take a bite out of your mirror. Old hands call the stretch I was on the mine road. It passes by a run of abandoned adits black as coin slots, and 2 short highway bores bored straight through the ribs of the canyon. The kind truckers remember because you can't see the exit when you enter. I knew the story before I ran the road. Everybody who's bought fuel between Twin and Arco knows it. Driver named Hank used to pull for our company, back when our logo had the old swoop arrow. Ran the same route every week until he didn't. One night he vanished somewhere between the first tunnel and the second. No skid marks, no debris, no answers. Company wrote a letter. Family held a service with an empty casket. Fleet rumor said they scrapped the tractor a year later after the insurance finished chewing it. I don't scare easy. You can and do this job. But I don't disrespect a road's memory either. I came up on the first bore at 047. The approach sign was old and honest. Sound horn, 1-lane curve. Clearance 14-1. The mouth ate the weak light of my LEDs and pressed damp cool across my hood that smelled like wet rope and old lime. I eased down to 36, jake off. Hands at 5 and 7 like the instructor taught me. Breath matched to the engine's hum. My headlights combed the ribs of concrete and painted their drips in thin strokes on my hood. The radio gave a little click like someone tapped the mic and thought better of it, then quieted into a held breath. Halfway in, something flared in the curve ahead. Headlights, low and tired, coming awake. Not the slap-right punch of modern LEDs. A thick, honeyed light. The kind sealed behind glass thick enough to survive a hailstorm. They winked and then held steady, angled in a turnout carved into the inside of the bend. I lifted a hair but didn't touch the brake. There's a way headlights sit when a truck is parked with the nose crooked. These had it. A shape resolved behind the light. Square hood, visor with a missing tooth in the center. Old mirrors hung off black arms that arced like the handles on a cast-iron kettle. A rust-burned red bled through the wet. Up high on the sleeper, my company's arrow, our old one, ghosted under grime. On the door, under the rivet line, white numbers showed themselves in my beam. Crooked from a life of pressure washing. Unit 2876. I've filled out pre-trips with that number in the lower right-hand corner of a yard sheet. Old training records have it typed there. Stuck to the bulletin board back at the terminal under a thumbtack that never rusts. 2876 was Hank's truck. I keyed up out of reflex. Eastbound in the bore, I said, keeping it steady. Eyes on the chalked mirror strikes that told me where other men had misjudged the wall. You parked up in the turnout? You need a pull or a call? The radio swallowed me whole and gave nothing back. No static, no echo. The two yellow lights held like eyes that knew me. The shape behind them looked heavier than the light allowed, a square nose grown tired. No plume of exhaust, no waver of heat, just presence. I rolled past without stopping because stopping under 80,000 lb in wet concrete is how you make a new story out of an old one. As my bumper drew even with the rusted rig's bumper, those yellow lights rose a fraction as if whatever wore them inhaled. The hair along my forearms lifted under the flannel like a tide under grass. My own headlights flickered. Not the relay click flicker, but the animal flinch I'd felt once when a deer exploded out of a ditch into my beams. The dash backlights dimmed and swelled in the same breath. The radio clicked hard twice. The second click had a throat in it. And then I was past, as simple as that. The tunnel exhaled me into wet, dark canyon. The road taking its weight back under my tires. The mirrors showing only the curve swallowing itself. I took the next mile with that careful looseness you do when something has tried your nerves and you don't want to teach your hands to shake. The night smelled like rain and hot iron. The engine sang the single note it was born for. I told myself old units get pulled out of scrapyards for movie sets. I told myself a rancher kept an antique tractor for parades. I told myself my job was forward. The second tunnel sat a few bends up, shorter, tighter, its mouth slapped with black streaks from 1,000 wet winters. I blew a courtesy tap on the air horn and rolled in. The CB gave nothing. The GPS arrow froze at the mouth like it did in the first bore. Fine. Paint lines and judgment. That's all a man needs when the lights are honest. Halfway through, the radio woke again. One little half cough, not voice, not static, the sound of a relay choosing. The hair behind my ears prickled in a way that made me feel 12 and dumb on a dirt bike in a thunderstorm. The far end of the tunnel showed itself as a rectangle of lighter black. I drew toward it. Somewhere behind me, air shifted. Not a wind, but a suggestion like a draft across the neck when a door opens in a house that shouldn't have a door there. The rear camera in the dash is junk, but it lives. I thumbed a glance at it and saw what the little chip brain could make sense of. Wet concrete, the ribbed curve of the bore, a smear of amber where my own markers bounced. And for a second, in the top edge of the frame, a drowned yellow swelling like a lantern in a well. 2 headlight discs too far apart for a pickup, and too close to be anything but a face leaning in behind me. I put eyes back on the lane and held what I had. The tunnel let me go. You could end a story there and your hands would learn nothing. Mine learned in the next 7 miles. Once back in sky, the radio found a voice it didn't have. A thin, doubled breath like someone stood too close to the mic and forgot to talk. My Qualcomm tablet threw a banner I hadn't seen before. Convoy mode enabled, EO2 14, unit 2876. It logged speed and spacing like it had decided I was drafting a partner. In the little box where it shows arrow me and arrow you, there were 2 arrows. Mine and another tucked a truck length off my trailer doors. I glanced in the mirror and saw nothing but the river's black water and my own marker lights scudding over wet rock. I slowed 5 miles an hour to see if anything closed the gap. The tablet drew the ghost arrow in a line with me, unbothered. Dispatch, I said, punching the quick dial because if you're going to be crazy with witnesses. Log just tagged me convoyed with 2876. You showing anybody around me? The night shift guy's voice was a yawn trying to be professional. Say again, Logan? Convoy mode flagged. Says I'm paired with 2876. Silence. I could hear him blink through the phone. Keyboard noises. Man, that unit's not in fleet. That number's retired. Retired like changed to a new unit, or retired like scrapped back when we had flip phones? He didn't laugh. Scrapped in 96, he said after a second. Insurance, you know. That incident. The road made a long left along the river. In the mirror, that drowned yellow flicker swelled and then hid itself in the curve like a shy thing. My fuel pressure needle twitched. The check ABS light winked once and fell asleep again. Something breathed in the cab that wasn't me or diesel. A dry, faint smell like warm varnish and old gear oil soaked into wood. I could have pulled over. I didn't. I don't stop for curiosities, not on wet rock with 2 lanes and a river drop. I kept the engine in its song and watched the paint. The Qualcomm's little map moved like I was 2 units deep in a night run. Notes scrolling. Spacing. Safe. Speed. Maintained. Comlink. Good. It thought we were talking. My CB remained a church. I could have pulled over. I didn't. I don't stop for curiosities, not on wet rock with 2 lanes and a river drop. I kept the engine in its song and watched the paint. The Qualcomm's little map moved like I was 2 units deep in a night run. Notes scrolling. Spacing safe. Speed maintained. Comlink good. It thought we were talking. My CB remained a church. The 7 miles bled like a slow nosebleed. Every time a reflector post swept by, a second shadow tagged it half a breath later in the corner of my eye. Every time I breathed, the defrost pushed ghost warmth back that made the skin under my shirt feel sticky. I tried the horn once to see if the canyon would tell me how dumb I was. The blast hit rock and came back thin. Under the thin came a lower note, dragged and patient, like a 2-tone air horn gone sick pulled through water. At Aero 221, the Qualcomm chirped and the banner evaporated. Convoy mode disengaged, spacing lost. The radio woke to real noise. Somebody out near Chalice calling a steer in the road. A guy complaining about wipers that wouldn't stop chattering. The air in the cab unbuttoned. The heater felt like heat again. I rolled my shoulders and realized I'd been braced like a man expecting a punch that finally landed somewhere else. I drove 2 more miles and pulled into a turnout with an abandoned way shed crouched in it like an old dog. The rain hung in the beam of my parking lamps like lint. I set the brakes. The truck sagged onto its bags with a tired sigh. I thumbed the rear camera again. Nothing. The dash cam card came out with a little click like it was glad to leave. I ran the clip on my phone, thumb scrubbing through tunnel wall drip, my markers holding a clean red and black. The audio's not good on that unit. It caught engine and the quick breath I took when those old headlights opened their eyes, and under it, something that wasn't. A low tone that shifted when I slowed, the ghost of a horn, turned into a smear by a microphone too cheap to tell you the truth. I walked the trailer with a flashlight because superstition only gets to win when the facts fail. Water beaded on the rub rail and ran in little worlds. On the rear doors, in that brushed aluminum where any touch shows itself, 4 long streaks ran from the top hinge down, clean tracks in a skin of road filth, spaced like fingers pulling themselves along. Rust dust dotted the bumper step like someone had shaken a mat there. My glove picked up flakes when I touched the latch. They left a pattern on the black nitro like old blood. The smell that came off those flakes when rain hit them was wet iron. I wiped the streaks. They came off easy and left my sleeve smelling like a scrapyard after a thunderstorm. Morning at the dock in Salmon, the yard light buzzing blue and dull. My phone buzzed back with a message from dispatch. FYI, check the system. No convoy-capable units within 40 miles of you last night. Also, 2876 shows as scrapped, Nampa, Sept. 1996. He'd attached a scanned sheet from a file older than my career. Unit 2876. VIN scratched out in a yard hands rough script. Date, 09/13/96. Condition, total loss. I ran that road again 2 weeks later because schedules don't believe in ghosts. I was loaded heavier that night. Sugar and flour, the kind of weight that settles your hands. Rain again. Same cold sneaking through the vents. Same drip stitching the tunnel ribs. I tapped the courtesy horn and kept to the paint. Nothing flared in the first bore except my own reflection on the drip line. At the second halfway, the radio did its little double click the way a throat clears when there's a story to tell and no breath to push it. I didn't answer. I kept my line. Out in sky again, the Qualcomm behaved. No convoy, no banner, but in the corner of the screen where the icons live you never touch, a grayed-out truck silhouette sat behind my arrow for a mile like a shadow that hadn't made up its mind to leave. Then it slid off the edge and the road became just a road again. You want me to explain it? I want to. My head has a drawer where it keeps explanations for bad nights. Wiring gremlins, multipath reflections bouncing GPS off canyon walls, some rancher's antique tractor parked up where it should never have been. Maybe convoy mode hiccuped. Maybe my dash cam smeared its own noise into a second horn. Maybe my hand felt rust because I'd already decided to. Maybe. Here's what I can tell you without lying. 7 miles of canyon felt less alone than they should have. My tablet believed something was a truck that wasn't showing in any glass. My rear doors wore the kind of clean a hand leaves when it's the last thing a hand can do. And the old number on the old door in the wet, 2876, looked like paint that wants to hold on even when steel doesn't. If you run that Idaho Nightline and your Qualcomm bings convoy mode with a number nobody's issued since the Clinton years, don't argue. Don't stop to solve a mystery with 80,000 pounds breathing behind you. Put the engine in the eye, note it likes, keep your hands soft and let the canyon and whoever's still working it do their miles with you. If he wants to leave at the second bend, he will. If he needs 7 miles, give him 7. If he wants to lay a palm on your doors, let him have that too. Because sometimes the last delivery isn't freight. Sometimes it's a driver making sure somebody gets through the part he didn't. And the road keeps its own paperwork. I run nights because the road keeps its promises after midnight. Fewer campers drifting across lanes. Fewer phones lighting up faces in my mirrors. Fewer brake checks that turn a grade into a parking lot. Name's Easton. 17 years moving groceries and paper across Nevada and California, bouncing between Reno and Sacramento like a sewing machine. Rig that night 2020 Kenworth T680. X15 tuned to sing at 1/300. Automated 12-speed I keep in manual on the hills because machines don't feel weight the way hands do. 53-foot dry van, mixed pallets, cereal, boxed milk, canned goods, grossed at 74 and change. The cab was a held warmth around my shins. The wing window cracked a finger so diesel, rain-wet asphalt, and the metallic ghost of stale coffee could keep me honest. The Sierra Cuts aren't the longest tunnels you'll see, but they're tight and old and built by men who thought trucks would always be smaller. Mile 47 is where the rumor lives. Every driver who runs the Donner route long enough hears it. The man on the rail. Guys swear he crouches over the tunnel mouth where the catwalk runs, just high enough to be in your high beams for one blink. Pale face, bad grin, gone when you roll under him. Some say he walks the rail inside the bore. Others say he drops down, rides the roof a mile, then steps off like nothing matters. Mostly you treat it like weather and roll, because letting a story take the wheel is how you end up part of it. It was late November, rain working itself into sleet near the summit. The mirrors carried halos, sodium lamps at wide exits smeared into the wet. Wipers ticked a tired metronome. Channel 19 had been a hum near Truckee, plow crews calling passes, a cattle pot cussing at ice on the inside of his driver's window, then settled into the kind of hush that makes you glance at the squelch. I keep my ears on even when the radio's quiet. Silence tells on itself. Mile 47 came up with the shape I know too well, a cut shouldered with granite and a tunnel mouth like a punched-out eye. No shoulder, sound horn before entering. I eased down from 50 to 40, killed the Jake, locked my hands at 5 and 7 like the instructor drilled into me when I still wore a fresh hat. The air grew colder and older. Tunnel breath carries wet rope and lime. But up here it also stinks faintly of old creosote. Like the railroad ghosts the road was laid alongside still have opinions. I tapped the air horn once out of courtesy. My high beams reached up and combed the lip of the mouth. That's when I saw him, crouched on the iron rail where a maintenance catwalk sits, knees folded deep, fingertips light on the bar. He was pale enough to belong to stone, wrong pale under wet, a face picked out of bone by my light. He wasn't dirty. He wasn't clean. He was the sort of pale that remembers heat but doesn't make any. The grin didn't reach his eyes because his eyes weren't grinning, they were busy. Teeth showed like he'd learned how to do it from a picture. My right hand tightened on the wheel until the leather squeaked. The instinct that makes deer look bigger in your headlights told me to brake. Training slapped that hand down. 80,000 pounds doesn't stop for a rumor in a one-lane curve. I kept the note of the engine steady and went under him. The sound changed. It always does in a bore. The world narrows into drip and hum. But the radio did something else. It coughed like someone about to speak and decided not to. Relay clicking small and human. The GPS arrow froze at the mouth, a cartoon truck perched at the lip and refusing to follow. My odometer did what it should. The ribs of concrete moved like old vertebrae in my beams. Water stitched the hood with wet morse. The cab heat felt close, a little too full, like a crowded room before someone opens a door. Breaker 19, you catch a set of feet on the rail at the 47? I asked, more to hear myself sound normal than to make conversation. Static pressed against the speaker like felt. No voice threaded it. The CB is a liar sometimes. Tonight it was shy. I can count the ribs by feel now, not by sight. Hands learn the rhythm. Halfway, the tunnel curves left. The wet line along the right wall thickened into a smear. My left knee touched the cold plastic of the door. That's when the dashcam LED flicked from green to red for no reason it's ever offered before. Then back. The truck's dome light breathed a fraction brighter without turning on. I caught it in the top edge of the glass and told myself electricity is a nervous animal. The exit opened as a lighter black ahead. I rolled toward it the way you walk toward a door you know will be locked even though it never has been. The radio clicked again, two tiny sounds with a throat between them. I reached instinctively to tap the mic to feel the switch travel. Before I got there, something threaded the speaker, soft and wrong flat, a whisper pitched to be inside your ear, not on it. Easton. Not my handle. My name. The cab felt too warm. The window crack breathed wet cold that moved across my cheekbone and found the edge of my eye like a fingertip. I kept my hands where hands belong when something wants you to move them. The exit took the hood and I burst into night. Rain heavier, light from the next curve's reflector board strobed into the wet. I took 2 miles before I trusted my jaw to open without making noise. I pulled into a turnout, gravel fanned under pine, a reflective barrel glossed with rain, and set the brakes. Bags sighed. The cab quieted into engine tick and wiper rests. I thumbed the rear camera and scrubbed back on the dash cam screen because sleep doesn't come if you let questions sit. The feed showed the tunnel's ribs and drip lines, old paint scuffed by mirrors. As I exited, the picture jumped a single frame, blink of white. Then clean, and there he was in the rear view where there hadn't been anything a second ago. The man. Not on the rail, but standing square in the center of the bore. Feet planted wide, hands loose at his sides, head cocked the way a dog listens to a word it knows. My markers painted red on his yellowed skin. The grin lived on his face like a borrowed coat. His clothes, were they clothes? Read wrong. Too smooth, like wet paper laid into the shape of a shirt and pants and then dried to memory. The eyes took my markers like glass. On the audio, under engine and drip and the chewed sound a cheap mic makes of diesel. A whisper. Easton. It walked up out of the noise and sat in my ear like a passenger who knows where my house is. He didn't move in the frame. The road moved around him. Then the feed returned to wet rock and my own doors. I put the card away because I didn't like that my hands had started to shake. The night didn't let me leave it there. A mile past the turnout, the CB woke. Not static, not a man. A dry, thin breath drawn across a microphone too close. The little pop of a lip touching a grill. Easton, the whisper said again, dry as a page turned in a library. Then nothing. I keyed up because you do even when you know you shouldn't. You got the wrong truck, friend. I tried to make it light and missed my aim. Silence decided to stretch. The road pushed against the tires, the rain's hiss rose, the mirrors kept small worlds of reflector light alive. The next tunnel, shorter, meaner, took my sound and gave me its own. I tapped the horn because courtesy is a habit that feels like armor. The beam combed the mouth. Rail clear. Inside, water murmured on concrete. My headlights flickered once, just to tremble, and came back heavier. Like someone had palmed the glass and lifted. Halfway through that one, the passenger glass fogged a smeared oval from the outside, not the inside, an impossible wet in the fast air, and cleared like a breath withdrawn. My right ear felt pressured the way it does when a window is cracked wrong. The CB coughed a syllable. E shorted itself into a click. On the far side, the Qualcomm, the tablet that thinks it knows everything, threw a blue banner I hadn't seen. Lane assist limited. Obstruction detected. I don't run their lane keep nonsense. I turn it off because if you trust a camera to steer a life, you're a passenger. The system shouldn't have anything to say about obstacles. It said it anyway. The icon that shows my truck and a gray ghost of something next to me drew a figure at my right front quarter. Nothing in meat space, nothing in glass, something in code. I kept moving. Not fast, not slow, just enough to give the brain a song to sing that wasn't panic. The banner vanished 2 bends later. I told myself the rain had written on the sensor. I told myself the mountain's RF is a bully and the CB is a bad judge of character. I told myself my name is on 100 forms and 100 terminals and it leaks like everything else. Down in the foothills, the weather quit being a person and went back to air. I rolled into the DC under a buzzing yard light that made moths die in tidy spirals. Parked. Pulled the SD again because the only way not to dream is to look. The clip didn't argue with me. He'd been there, rear frame catching him inside the tunnel, hands loose, head tilted, grin pinned on. The whisper printed as noise thick enough to shape into a word if you were willing. I didn't show the night manager. What would I say? That a face lived where faces shouldn't? They'd tell me to get sleep. They'd be right without being correct. I didn't show the night manager. What would I say? That a face lived where faces shouldn't? They'd tell me to get sleep. They'd be right without being correct. On the third night, because schedules don't honor hauntings, I took the westbound climb again. Fresh chains in the side box, the smell of damp iron sneaking into the cab. I counted mile markers because numbers behave. 45, 46, 47. The mouth sat darker than the grade leading to it. I tapped the air horn and watched the rail. Nothing crouched in the high comb of my beams. The grin I didn't want to think about didn't show its teeth. I let the Kenworth roll under the lip and the air pressed its old cool into the cab like church doors opening. Halfway through, the CB clicked twice, the sound of a mouth deciding. "Good night," I said, because some superstitions are polite. Nothing answered. On the exit, the headlights didn't flicker. The dome light stayed dead. The Qualcomm kept its mouth shut. 2 miles down, Where the rock gives up and the pines open into a view I'm never tired of, no matter how tired I am. The passenger glass fogged one soft finger-width line from the top edge and drew 4 letters in clean. East. Not my full name. Not the whole. The defrost cleared it like a hand wiping a mirror. I didn't touch the glass. I didn't say anything. I watched the paint. I breathed the warm diesel and wet pine and the metallic shadow taste of my coffee. And I let the grade take me. Here's what I can make true without lying. At mile 47, I saw a man on a rail where men don't stand. Inside the bore, my camera watched him watch me leave. My radio, wired, grounded, tested, learned to say my name in a voice that belonged to air. The truck, which is a machine and not a friend, flinched its lights like a body remembering a fever. I've got a clip that doesn't care what you think, and a cab that sometimes fogs from the wrong side. If you run that line and hear about the watcher, don't get cute. Don't break for a grin. Don't floor it for a dare. Announce yourself. Keep the note of your engine steady. Watch the paint laid down by a man who stood in that bore with cold hands and believed a line could save you. If the radio coughs your name, let it have it. Names are cheap. Stopping isn't. Because some tunnels hold water and some hold weather and some hold whatever stands on rails and learns your voice. And all they ask in return is that you pass through like you belong.